Hi, welcome to the Wisdom Years. I'm Wayne Morrison. This is the third and final episode of The Blessings of Cancer, my interview with Jen Kupalo, my daughter. And I have a question, Jennifer. How did you become sober?
Nothing can get you sober, and anybody who, again, has dealt with this knows this until you're absolutely ready. So I had several things that anybody else would call rock bottom. Several embarrassing incidents, terrible incidents. And I had one of those terrible, embarrassing incidents which landed me in the hospital. And there was a nurse, and as an afterthought, she was exiting the hospital room, and she paused, and she said, "Listen, there's an alcoholics group that runs over here." And so she was kind of taken aback that I showed interest, and she gave me some literature on it, and I went into the group, and I was just ready. I was just done with that life. I was really ready. And the group is the primary reason I got sober. But if that nurse never pauses and says, "Listen, I have this literature," I never even know about the group. So my first day of group, I cried my way through it. And my second day, I cried my way through it. And on the third day, I made this commitment, I think out loud. I said, no matter what these leaders of this group therapy tell me to do, I don't care if it's sit in the corner and, suck your thumb for a half hour. I didn't care what they said. I said, I'm going to do it. And it is primarily what got me sober, that and honestly, God. I mean, you can't get sober, in my opinion, without those things, inner will and God. Very unintentionally, but in retrospect, looking back at it, I think God was always present, but I was not aware that he was always present, nor did I seek out his presence for my entire marriage. It's ironic because Rob, my husband, my first husband, was very, very spiritual. He was also a scientist. He was an engineer, very spiritual, but he was also religious. And he would go to church alone because I simply had no interest in any of that. But I also didn't really practice any spirituality. And once Rob dies, again, I think this I don't believe in coincidence, so this kind of serendipitous thing happens where I have this major life tragedy, and then I go through my own major turmoil, and there's nothing left for me but to look for God. And so what ends up happening is I'm an English teacher, so I start reading. I start doing crazy amounts of reading on spirituality. I find a Zen Buddhist monk who I love so much, Thich Nhat Hanh. He happened to be on an episode of Oprah Winfrey, and everything he was saying was resonating with me. And so I was buying book after book about Buddhism in general, books that he had written. And then I went on from there to other spiritual teachers. There's Eckhart Tolle. There's plenty of them. And I really sought it out. And I've come to a place where it's so important to me that it's kind of surreal to think about how I went through much of my life, much of it, with just almost zero interest in it, and probably always the need for it.
My final question for you is, how did you come up with the title, The Blessings of Cancer, for a book?
Even though you're my dad and we talk every day, pretty much, I haven't told you this yet, but just last week, a student said to me, "Miss Coop, you really need to write a book about your experiences with your husband and cancer." I go, funny you say that. I have the title and some of the first chapter written in a file on my computer for a good 7 or 8 years. It needs to be written. It will be written at some point, I believe, because it's, again, almost like a calling to write it. That title came to me with zero effort. Zero. I thought, what will I call it? The Blessings of Cancer, obviously. And when you say that, especially to a high school group or a high school student, they'll go, "What are you talking about?" And I could list off, I can rattle off the blessings.
What are they?
There's a million. How about knowing that you have a finite amount of time? Everybody knows it, but how about really knowing it? 2 to 3 weeks before he died, he was getting very ill. He said, "Jen, I need you to go to CVS." "Okay, what do you need?" He goes, "I need you to get birthday cards for both kids until the age of 18. And he spent weeks. He did giraffes. He would write these long, beautiful messages. And I say, you could have given my kids on their 16th birthday a Ferrari. They didn't care. They wanted the daddy card. And it's like, that's probably my favorite example of what you get to do when you know. But Rob got to literally call every person he wanted to speak to, and he did. Called them all, visited everybody who he wanted to come visit, visited. He got to say individual goodbyes. And when I went to grief group, I watched women who had had husbands dropped out of a heart attack be angry and bitter and resentful. And I was like, my God, I was gifted with such peace and joy at the end. I had none of that. I had none of that. And they had to go through a lot more. This is the easiest question you've asked me. It comes to me so quickly. Leave nothing unsaid. Leave nothing on the table. I got to go through everything. Some of them weren't great. Some of them were marriage issues. I got to go through every question, every thought, every feeling, every thought that came to me, I gave to him, and he gave right back to me. And so there was this great time period of exchange of real feeling, real concern, real thinking, real substance that we don't always give to each other on a daily basis. We're busy with the minutia. We're busy with, we got to pay this bill. We got to get these dishes done. And when I often say, on that day when Rob showed up in the tow truck, it was like a heavy lead cloak fell off my body. It was liberating and terrifying at the same exact moment. Leave nothing unsaid, leave nothing on the table. Give them everything in your heart, pour it out to them. I'm almost sure they'll give it back to you.